Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Tricky. I'm a senior in high school, and I was just wondering because I find it quite hard to digest that anyone can make such a moving film without being affected himself or herself. So, how has the production of this film changed you personally and the way you face your own dragons?
Well, that's a really good question, and I have to give you an honest answer to that because I did say that I felt that you couldn't make a good film if you weren't honest. Well, I'm a very ordinary human being, and I'm not the brightest human being I know. Thank God I know some very bright ones. And in being ordinary, I've made lots of mistakes in my life, and I've personally done things that I thought were right at the time, and then when I think back on them, I think, my God, that was really extremely selfish. And your only cleverness was to disguise your selfishness as a kind of revolutionary act. Actually, it wasn't. It was just plain selfishness. It just sounded better if you said, I'm standing up for myself, or whatever it was. So, at that level, I certainly, when I started writing the movie, knew I would have to face up to the fact that, I'm not all good, I'm not all bad either, but I've certainly got my bad side. And another thing I had to confront too, which is, I've conventionally been the sort of happy atheist, which is partly a sort of rather lazy position. Because I sort of accepted the status quo that said, well, God is just superstition, and superstition is old-fashioned, and I took the sort of default idea that somehow religion should justify itself and atheism was the status quo. But I realized I couldn't write the movie if I did that, but what I had to do was to accept honestly and utterly that Jose Maria was telling the truth, and that I had to suspend any kind of, clever intellectual judgments about what I thought religion was. And that taught me a lot, because it really humbled me, and I really began to see the full, open power of spirituality, and I began to realize that spirituality is a journey, and it's a very courageous journey, and it's a very crucial journey, and to call it just superstition is not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign, and I'm afraid applies to me, it's a sign of utter, complete, and almost inhuman arrogance. That's what I learned.
Thank you.
Hi, if I may throw you a token technical question tonight. I just noticed that you used a lot of hard lighting in your cinematography. There are a lot of contrasts going on, a lot of highlights and shadows sort of playing in the same frame. And I noticed that you shot through a lot of glass and that you used reflections a lot. So if you could just comment on these motifs and how they sort of serve the overarching themes that we've been talking about throughout this night, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'll do my best. Well, of course, the visual language of the film is the real language of the film, you're absolutely right. And the mirrors and reflections for me were, I was trying to use them in two ways, actually. I was trying to say, look, we're very, very certain that we know what reality is in this day and age, and most scientists, not, however, I think the best scientists, I think, let me put it this way, biologists and the biological scientists tend to be the most rigidly materialist, which I suppose is understandable in some senses. Cosmologists, on the other hand, who are people who study the whole cosmos, actually, in a curious way, tend to be the freest and the most able to, if you like, understand the full remit of spirituality and spiritual behavior. So they understand reality in a very different way. So what I was trying to show is something that Einstein said, I suppose, when he said that reality is real, well, I'm paraphrasing him, but reality is real enough, but it's actually an illusion, it just happens to be more permanent. And that's very important, because if you come back to what I was saying about energy, there are many ways of looking at the room assembled before me. I mean, in a sense, it is a room of individual human beings. But if I was to look at it on a purely molecular level or a subatomic level, I'd see a very, very different organization of energy in this room. And therefore, that means that you can look at the world and say, at a certain level, at the subatomic level, at the quantum physical level, there's one set of rules. At the Newtonian level, there's a different set of rules. We live in the Newtonian level. Why is there a difference? At the moment, science is definitely trying to annihilate the difference and find, the explanation for everything. But I think the difference is the point. The difference is showing us that we are a construct. we are constructed by some other level of reality which we've approached through quantum physics, which is certainly to do with our reality, because it's to do with the most basic form, particles, etc., most basic forms of energy, that, if you like, have maybe, and this is not too strong a word, conspired with each other to create this reality. And we're beginning to approach this. We're finding this genetically. For instance, we've felt for a long time that evolution is purely the random interplay of genes. I've always been rather critical of that, because I've wondered how it could be that if we are a system designed to avoid mutation genetically, because we have RNA which spends all its time cutting mutations out, how could we then be in a system that's only managed to survive by being random? That doesn't seem to be like the way nature works. I mean, why would we? It doesn't make sense. So what that might be saying is that the genetic structure itself may be organically involved with the present. And this is true, and I'll tell you how it can be true. There's a certain kind, I think, of sea creature, it's very tiny, that usually has no shell on its head or no tail. If the mother of this creature receives an input of fear, i.e. there's a predator, when she gives birth, she'll give birth to an offspring that has a horny head and a sharp tail. That's an absolute moment of seeing that there appears to be a correlation between, if you like, the genetic possibility in the future and the present. This is my, I rather love science, as you can see. This is my way of saying that the reality that we live in needs to be thought about all the time as real enough, but also an illusion. And so the mirrors, the reflections, the fact that we see things at odd angles, the very fact that it's a film, is me saying to the public all the time, you are unique. You are a unique illusion. And Buddhism would say the same thing. You're a unique and staggering illusion. And if we accept the beauty of that illusion and the beauty of those illusions,